I'm Brad Power, and this is the Cancer Patient Lab. And we're honored today to have with us Jeff Holtmeyer, who's going to talk about becoming the CEO of his care. He's a tech executive by background, and he knows he's learned a lot, and he wants to share it with us today. Um, I think it was colon, and his diagnosis was colon and pancreatic cancer. And so we have some pancreatic cancer folks here today who may have some commiseration or thoughts or questions for him in that regard. Before we get started, we have is typically a few housekeeping items to cover. Just quickly, this is for information purposes only. This is not medical advice. We try to arm our patients with information they can take to their medical team. Secondly, everything that will be said here will be made public. So if you're concerned about the video recording be published or your image or your name or whatever, you should disguise your name and hide your image. And then finally, we are a nonprofit, a 501c3, and we depend on the kindness of people making donations to provide services like this webinar, and would appreciate any donations you might be willing to make, which you can do very easily on our website at cancerpatientlab.org, and there's a donate button. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Brad, for the invitation and for letting me speak a little bit longer than he probably likes. But I think there's some good information here for everyone. Hello and welcome to everybody. Whether you're here because of a personal diagnosis, a loved one's journey, or simply a gut feeling that there must be more to healing than prescriptions and procedures, I think you'll find this time valuable. It's time to critically think about how medicine is practiced and how groupthink and outdated protocols can shape treatment decisions. Even if you don't agree with every choice that I made in my journey, I encourage you to challenge the assumptions and encourage you to think for yourself. It's a strong contribution to the broader conversation about medicine, healing, and personal agency. My name is Jeff Holtmeyer, and like many of you, I never thought I'd be here either. Almost my entire life, I was a picture of health. No prescriptions, ever. No chronic issues. Actively playing sports 5 days a week. But that didn't stop my routine screening from revealing the words that nobody wants to hear. You've got cancer. In that moment, maybe I was expected to become a passive patient, but instead, I became something very different. I took control and became the CEO of my own health. And that's what today is about. Not fear, not blame, but leadership and self-leadership. Since I'm an entrepreneur, I'll use a business metaphor. If my accountant delivers me a solution to a problem that I'm not pleased with, I'll get multiple opinions from other CPA firms. If my lawyer recommends an approach that doesn't make sense to me, I'll do the same and seek other views. However, when it comes to the health of the only body we'll have while living on Earth, why are most people submissive to those in white coats? You'll hear things today that may surprise you, like the fact that chemotherapy has its roots in mustard gas. Yeah, the same chemical weapon banned in war. Or that most of the most recent study used to justify a common chemo regimen that I was offered was from 1992, more than 30 years ago. And that in some of our most respected cancer centers, the standard treatment hasn't been updated in decades. You'll also learn that energy healing, long dismissed as fringe or woo-woo, is now being studied at places like MD Anderson Cancer Center, showing measurable effects on cancer cell death. Healing is not just a physical process, but a powerful mind-body loop. Our mental state directly shapes immune function, hormonal balance, and even tissue repair. Stress and negative emotions suppress recovery, while practices like deep rest, breath work, positive expectation, and quality sleep activate the body's repair systems, reducing inflammation and accelerating healing. In essence, the mindset and daily habits aren't secondary to treatment. They're central drivers to the healing process itself. Yes, science is finally catching up to what some traditions have known for thousands of years. The body is energy, and energy can heal. This webinar isn't about rejecting allopathic medicine. It's about integrating knowledge, asking smarter questions, and reclaiming the authority we too often handed away. Because here's the truth. No one, not even the most credentialed expert, knows your body, your values, or your intuition better than you. You're not a passenger, you're the pilot. You're not a diagnosis, you're the decision maker. And you're not just someone hoping for healing. You can become the CEO of your own health. Let's begin. I'm about 5'10", around 200 pounds, with 89% skeletal muscle and about 18% body fat, according to my watch. I play full court basketball 3 days a week, where I'm always the oldest by at least a generation. I also play competitive league tennis twice weekly and a social round once a week. I've always been an entrepreneur and currently serve as executive chairman and principal of a software development company with no plans to slow down anytime soon. Health and wellness have always been priorities for me. I haven't eaten a fast food since 1984. I avoid processed foods and focus instead on a predominantly Chinese influenced diet, thanks to my wife. I enjoy red wine, period. Other than in rare cases when I need an antibiotic, I've never taken prescription drugs. Intermittent fasting is part of my routine 6 days a week with one full 24-hour-a-day fast weekly. I'm fortunate to live a low-stress life along with a loving and supportive wife, 2 great sons, and 3 young grandkids. I'm socially outgoing and rarely get sick. I've even skipped flu shots my entire adult life without issue. My personality is fundamentally positive, open-minded and outgoing, and I cultivate a profound sense of gratitude for life. This mindset is coupled with a powerful conviction that the mind possesses the ability to influence outcomes and attain any aspiration. All of this matters because your lifestyle and physical condition play a huge role in your health. But in the United States medical system, they're usually ignored. When you fill out clinical intake forms, are you ever asked about what you eat, how much you move, how you sleep, or how you manage stress? Probably not. And yet, these are key factors that can help determine whether a particular treatment will actually work. It's a serious blind spot in a system that claims to care about healing. After a lifetime of avoiding any illness, at age 65, I faced some unexpected health challenges. It all started with a routine screening that led to a colonoscopy, where doctors found and removed some polyps. They also discovered what they claimed from a PET scan were early stage cancer cells in my colon and a cyst on my pancreas. This was a shock, considering my healthy lifestyle and no family history, and having gone my entire life without the need for pharmaceuticals or medical professionals, except for broken bones and stitches when I was a kid. Plus, I had no symptoms. I went through the expected stages of denial, anger, realization, and acceptance, ultimately landing on treating it as a business problem that I needed to solve while convincing myself that it was, in fact, solvable. I first went to one of the country's top pancreatic surgeons, thoroughly vetted through my professional network, which is deep. Within minutes, he recommended the Whipple procedure, one of the most invasive and complex surgeries known to medicine, while dismissing the value of a simple endoscopic ultrasound that I asked about. He barely asked me any questions before sketching a diagram of my organs on the back of a pamphlet and described how he would cut and paste my organs together. That's when I realized surgeons recommend surgery. In America's system, they're often paid more the bigger and riskier the procedure. Hospitals use relative value units, or RVUs, to tie physician pay to procedure volume and complexity, creating an incentive structure that can tilt medical judgment towards profit, not patient. I walked out never to speak to him again. An EUS later confirmed my cyst was benign. Columbia University's multidisciplinary tumor board advised monitoring, not mutilization. The lesson was clear. Our system isn't just about care. It seems to be about revenue. Patients who don't question it risk becoming a line item on their bonus plan. As I mentioned earlier, my routine colonoscopy had revealed benign polyps. However, a larger polyp in the upper right ascending colon was noted but not removed because it was too difficult for the surgeon to access. Subsequently, a second colonoscopy by a referred specialist at Indiana University successfully removed this larger polyp, and pathology showed early stage cancer cells. The doctor recommended immediate surgical removal of the section of colon from which he removed the polyp, along with chemotherapy. He stated that the stage of the cancer in this area could not be determined until after the section of the colon was removed. This was surprising to me that in this day and age, despite our advanced medical screening techniques, certain cancers cannot definitively be diagnosed until removed from the body. Obviously, this could require significant trauma to the body, possibly for no good reason, should the diagnosis turn out to be incorrect. Concurrently, a follow-up PET scan indicated a potential issue in my small bowel area, leading to the decision to remove the small growth there as a precaution if and when I had the colon surgery. I then searched for a specialist within the United States medical system who would consider alternative treatments for surgery and chemo, given my overall health and medical history and no symptoms. I consulted with experts and institutions including Johns Hopkins, the University of Cincinnati, the James Cancer Center at Ohio State, the Mayo Clinic, Stanford, Sloan Kettering, and Columbia University. Interestingly, the recommended approach remained consistent: surgery and chemotherapy. I then retreated to my Chinese medical practitioner, an MD and former oncologist that I used for acupuncture and other natural remedies. He bluntly stated to me that since every doctor in the US, including him, has studied from the same textbooks in the last 50 years, the answer will always be the same from all allopathic providers: surgery and chemo. However, he also started me on a weekly acupuncture treatment along with custom Chinese herb regimen to address the targeted area. He also mentioned that many of his oncology patients found peace of mind through surgery, suggesting I might consider that as well. After some time and reflection, I conceded and scheduled the surgery at Sloan Kettering in New York to be performed by a renowned surgical oncologist. The day before the surgery, we had a preparation consultation with the doctor and his team where he described the process for removal of the growth in the small bowel and half of my colon. Note, this was not disclosed in my original meeting with the surgeon. He then described the likely side effects, including a 40% chance of serious issues such as wearing a colostomy bag and other not so cool things in your digestive system. When I asked why it was necessary to remove half of the colon for a small polyp in the upper right ascending section, he said that he only does hemicolectomy, which involves removing the ascending colon, the cecum, and a portion of the transverse colon, and then cutting and pasting the rest of it together. Now, I could be wrong, but as I understood him, such extensive surgery wasn't even strictly necessary. It was just his MO. I then asked his opinion of the likelihood of the polyp being cancerous, and he answered, probably 10%. So on the spot, I decided to forego colon surgery, then proceed only with the removal of the growth in the bowel. This meant a 4-hour surgery and a short stay at the $2,000 per night semi-private room at Sloan Kettering Hospital. After the procedure, I had to wait for about 2 weeks for the pathology results. When the surgeon called, his tone was blunt. The growth in my bowel showed B-cell lymphoma and could spread. He strongly advised me to see an oncologist, naturally recommending a colleague at Sloan Kettering. My wife and I returned to New York to meet the Sloan Kettering oncologist, and after a few preliminary remarks, she detailed her proposed treatment for B-cell lymphoma, a rigorous regimen of 13 chemotherapy sessions followed by further testing. Before the appointment, I had delved into research on chemo and its effectiveness, knowing that that was going to be a recommended treatment. Discovering the origins of chemo dating back to the mid-1940s Germany, when researchers used mustard gas for medical purposes. Yeah, chemo's origin lies in mustard gas, a bioweapon outlawed by the Geneva Protocol for use in war, but apparently okay for the human body. My findings also indicated that chemotherapy's efficacy is questionable and may be outweighed by the numerous adverse effects. Recently, I read a study that suggests it could be valuable to ask questions of whether, at least in some instances, chemotherapy can do more harm than good. This study examined the long-term risks of secondary cancers in patients. It was found that certain chemotherapy regimens were also associated with increased risk of developing secondary malignancies, including leukemia and cancers of the bones, joints, and soft tissues. When I questioned the oncologist's rationale for the treatment plan, she referenced statistics from a 1992 study on the effects of chemo treatment for B-cell lymphoma patients. I was stunned and assumed she had misspoken, thinking she had tended to say 2022. But she asserted, no, 1992 is the most recent study for this form of cancer treatment. In terms of human health and advances in our understanding, it would seem to make sense to periodically revisit our standard treatment models to see if they could use an upgrade based on new discoveries. But given that the most recent study of the standard treatment for B-cell lymphoma is over 30 years old, this approach does not seem to be much of a priority in the system. This is particularly noteworthy given that chemotherapy treatment is one of the most financially lucrative medical interventions in American medical history. To illustrate, here are some facts and studies from a financial impact of chemotherapy in the United States. Studies show that chemotherapy drugs account for 65% of the revenue in a typical oncology practice. A Journal of the American Medical Association cross-sectional study examined private payer-specific prices for 25 commonly used non-oral cancer therapies at 61 National Cancer Institute designated cancer centers. Median price markups across the centers ranged from approximately 120% to 630%, on top of the estimated hospital acquisition cost. Independent studies have also indicated that financial relationships between oncologists and pharmaceutical companies may influence prescribing behaviors. Oncologists receiving payments from the pharmaceutical industry have been found more likely to prescribe cancer drugs that are less effective or more expensive. After leaving New York, I was determined to locate an oncologist with more up-to-date protocols. I found one at a teaching hospital. While he considered chemotherapy as a treatment option, he proposed a greatly reduced course compared to the recommendation from the Sloan Kettering oncologist. However, when I expressed my decision against chemotherapy, we mutually agreed to explore further diagnostic testings, including ctDNA, Lynch syndrome, and Garden 360 tests to ascertain if any disease remained. Testing showed no pathogenic variants in the 77 genes that were analyzed. At this point, I had elected to pursue alternative natural therapies. The end result of this pursuit was that 6 months later, after a series of tests with the oncologist during a routine follow-up with him, he reported to me that the B-cell lymphoma was gone, without offering an explanation. This phenomenon is sometimes referred to in the medical community as spontaneous remission, a term used to describe the unexpected disappearance of cancer in a diagnosed patient. I had not informed him of my concurrent use of energy healing, acupuncture, radiofrequency treatment, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, again, and supplements aimed at the defective cells. How did this all come about? Well, after that first appointment at the teaching hospital, I began to do an immense amount of research around cancer, including reading about a dozen books. I had found myself torn between two worlds, the wisdom I had gathered from the writings of certain authors, including Dr. Peter Glidden and Dr. Leonard Colwell, along with my own research and the traditional slash and burn approach of cutting and chemo, the path that everyone seemed to expect me to take. I'm also a strong believer in the power of the mind to influence the body to heal naturally, along with the body's ability to naturally heal itself. And there seemed to be little place for this approach in traditional medical model. Another inspiration to me was my friend Andrew from New York, who was diagnosed with prostate cancer at a relatively young age. Like many, he turned to Sloan Kettering, where he was advised to undergo 4 rounds of radiation over several months, a regimen that carried significant risks and serious potential side effects. Refusing to accept his only option, Andrew searched for alternatives and discovered a doctor in Portugal offering a groundbreaking approach, a single modified radiation treatment. Ironically, the same doctor had previously practiced at Sloan Kettering in New York and had spent years advocating for this less invasive method, but the hospital refused to adopt it, deterred perhaps by economic disincentives. Andrew traveled to Portugal, underwent the single treatment, and successfully eradicated his prostate cancer, all without debilitating side effects. Inspired by alternatives, I wanted to talk to some of the authors of the books, so after weeks of searching on the internet, I was able to track down the now retired Dr. Leonard Colwell, the author of The Only Answer to Cancer, and seek his opinions. His assistant told me that he didn't practice any longer, but my insistence in tracking him down, along with some of his own internet sleuthing about me, led him to decide that I was a strong-willed person, true that, who would likely listen to his strict and unconventional methods. Dr. C was a practicing oncologist in Germany for 40 years and utilized alternative-based treatments and reportedly achieved a 92% success rate in over 35,000 patients, according to independent European studies. He explained to me that the body continuously produces abnormal or defective cells, and he advocates for natural methods to support the body's ability to eliminate these cells. He emphasized the importance of a healthy lifestyle, stress reduction, and a positive mental state in preventing the progression of these defective cells into cancerous ones. He also spoke with conviction about a hidden crisis many cancer patients face, the moment of emotional collapse that often follows a diagnosis. It's not just the cancer, it's everything else in life thrown at them. A recent layoff, a painful divorce, mounting debt. Then the word cancer drops like the final blow. In that instant, some patients feel as if their bodies receive a message that it's time to surrender. Add to that the trauma of surgery and chemotherapy and the toll on one's body and identity, and the fight becomes more than physical. It's psychological, it's spiritual. And if the will to live begins to erode, so can the effectiveness of any treatment. Healing starts not just with medicine, but with the belief that there's still something worth fighting for. Dr. C underscores the importance of cultivating a clear and focused mental state, emphasizing that the mind plays a central role in the body's ability to heal. Drawing on principles from psychoneuroimmunology, which is the scientific study of how thoughts, emotions, and stress influence the immune systems, he argues that mental clarity can help signal the body to shift from a state of chronic stress to one of repair and generation. Even when dealing with external pressures like financial hardships or relationship strains, he encourages patients to compartmentalize these distractions and intentionally direct their attention toward healing. Scientific research has shown that practices such as mindfulness meditation, guided imagery, stress reduction techniques can lower cortisol levels and inflammation, boost immune function, and improve treatment outcomes in cancer patients. In his view, aligning the mind body is not just complementary, it's foundational. By fostering mental resilience and emotional balance, patients can create a physiological environment that supports their immune system, enhances cellular repair, and potentially reduces tumor progression. Healing, he believes, begins with the mind's ability to partner with the body in a unified mission to survive and thrive. I had been uncertain about which treatment option to choose, traditional medical approach or alternative therapies. But after my session with Dr. C, I decided to stop the hybrid approach of allopathic and natural combination and go all in on the natural approach. That said, I was about to fully embrace this natural treatment strategy. I sought one final opinion from a surgeon friend to understand his perspective. This proved very valuable in that he recognizes the limitations of conventional medical system and had held some belief in natural therapies, as opposed to the outright rejection of natural approaches by many other doctors. He introduced me to Dr. B, an MD specializing in holistic and integrative healthcare for decades. We began our initial session by focusing on creating a treatment plan balancing health and efficacy, and also on exploring the possible origins of suspected cancer. This exploration included multiple tests, including one to determine if the weed killer Roundup was a contributing cause. It's relevant to note here that the International Agency for Research on Cancer, a division of the World Health Organization, classified glyphosate, the chemical in Roundup, as likely carcinogenic to humans. Dr. B prescribed a thorough blood analysis and suggested a range of supplements, from grounding mats for sleeping in conjunction with Rife radio frequency therapy and multispectral photobiomodulation therapy. Following the 3 months of weekly therapy and completion of Dr. B's supplement regimen, he said, "I can't do much more for you." And he suggested if I really wanted a conclusive evidence that there was something in my colon, a pre-nuvo scan would be the best approach. Well, I'd never heard of pre-nuvo, so I researched this comprehensive 3D MRI scanning system, which is only offered in a few cities across the country. We then journeyed to Chicago for the scan, experience that took place in a relaxing spa-like setting. The procedure itself lasted only about 90 minutes. Results were expected within 2 weeks. As you can imagine, anticipating a doctor's follow-up call did cause me some nervousness. The results from the doctor who administered the scan were good. The scan provided a very detailed analysis of my area of interest of the abdomen, along with exceptionally clear images. The previously known pancreatic cyst was confirmed but dismissed as benign. A hernia and other minor findings were also found. I experienced significant relief. There had been no mention of anything related to my colon. However, I wanted Dr. B to review the images after and offer his opinion, which he did a few days later. His first words were, "There's nothing in your colon." What's next? This journey has deepened my distrust of conventional medicine. While I focus this story on my personal experience, my distrust predates my own journey. I managed care for my parents until their deaths, where I gained early knowledge of the challenges of our healthcare system. Many medical schools have yet to fully integrate the whole person care into their curricula, resulting in a system that's often focused on treating illness or sick care rather than proactively promoting health. While some institutions are implementing changes, the majority of practicing physicians have been trained under the old model. This necessitates a shift in medical education to better equip future doctors. Until this evolution is widespread, I think taking personal responsibility as the CEO of our own health remains critically important. It's also important to note here that I do recognize the value of the U.S. medical system for emergency care, such as injuries sustained in a car accident or other trauma-related wounds. However, my experiences have led me to believe the system is largely geared towards revenue-generating disease management rather than promoting cures. This often relies on older, expensive surgical procedures and medications while largely ignoring innovative, natural, integrative healing practices, some of which various cultures have utilized for thousands of years. I also strongly believe the body's innate ability to heal itself and a powerful connection between the mind and the body. In fact, I believe it's so important here to note that if you are not of the belief that the mind-body connection is relevant to your health and you lack a strong will, my approach would not be for you. In the end, my experience has driven home the importance of personal responsibility in healthcare. We cannot afford to be passive recipients of medical advice, blindly following the recommendations of doctors without question. Instead, we must educate ourselves, seek multiple perspectives, and make informed decisions based on our own research and intuition. This is not to say that we should dismiss the expertise of medical professionals. Rather, we must become active partners in our own healing journey, working collaboratively with medical professionals to achieve optimal health. It is my sincere desire that this narrative will help encourage you and others to adopt a similar mindset, to question the status quo, and to seek out alternative paths of well-being. On a personal note, I readily admit that I don't know why the B-cell lymphoma disappeared, or why the cancerous polyp in my colon seemed to appear and then vanish. What I do know is I avoided subjecting my body to trauma of multiple surgeries and chemotherapy. Can I point to any single natural therapy or even a specific combination of such treatments and claim with certainty that that was the reason for the outcome? No. Could it be, as Dr. Colwell suggests, that the body has an innate ability to clear itself of defective cells? Possibly. I don't know for sure, but I'm at peace with that. What I do know is that the natural treatments and supplements I used had no harmful side effects. The radiofrequency therapy and energy healing were non-invasive. Fasting in and of itself to gain autophagy is a well-documented contributor to improved health. For these reasons, I'll continue to follow certain protocols to support my well-being. I'm not advocating for any one particular treatment modality. Rather, I encourage people to educate yourselves, consider all available options, and pursue what feels aligned with your own circumstances. Now, had I been experiencing more severe symptoms like coughing up blood, for instance, I may not have had the luxury to follow the path that I did. But in my case, I'm grateful that I did. Thank you.
Well, Jeff, that's in one place kind of a manifesto of similar ideas that people express, but it's like I could look across 10 webinars and I would find 10 instances. I'm thinking, because since I write the notes up from these sessions, I'm thinking like how many good quotes you had in there, and there are literally a dozen. And anyway, it's going to be a struggle to synthesize or to highlight what you've just said. And I would also say that it's very much in alignment with the general kinds of folks that we talk to here at the Patient Lab and the kind of members that we have in this community. So just thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to moderate now, and Mark, who knows the routine, has raised his hand, so I'll call on Mark. And for those of you who want to raise comments, you can either do so in the chat or you can do so by raising your hand. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. That was, I'll give you a quick background. I had diffuse B-cell lymphoma last year in the hospital, UCSF, 7 weeks. I had CAR T September last year, just complete remission, just had a 1-year checkup. I was interested in kind of the RVU. I hadn't heard that before, kind of the pricing. My gross medical bill last year, United Healthcare, 1.6 million. I'd go in for treatments. I'd see the bill, like a 5-hour session, $70,000-$80,000, most of it pharma costs. So interesting, how the whole country can survive on those kind of levels. Just a quick background. My sister died of cancer 5 years ago. My brother died about 2 weeks ago, pancreatic cancer. We have no family history of cancer. Sister, Michigan, brother, Florida, me here. So no environmental issue. I talked to my oncologist, no genetic issues, whatever. So hard to figure out. And I've got a 50-year friend. He's going in about a week for a mastectomy. He's a male having a mastectomy. So he's kind of in shock. So,
Wow.
It affects a lot of people, but interested kind of the economics of healthcare you talked about. So appreciate your overall perspective.
Yeah, thanks. There's more to what I said. I wrote a small book about this, and if anybody's interested, you can send me an email, and I can send you the link to it. It's on Amazon. And a lot of these things that I refer to, I footnote, and I provide where I got all the information, and you can look at it for yourself.
Okay, great.
I don't see any other questions, but so I'm going to call on Roger. Roger, if you don't mind, if you're available, I would be interested in your comments on Jeff's lecture, if you will.
Okay, well, thanks. So I might have missed it, but did you not have the Whipple then at the end of the day?
No, I did
or
not. I ran as fast as I could out the door. I did not have the Whipple.
And did they decide that it was misdiagnosed? It was actually it wasn't carcinogenic. It was benign.
It wasn't carcin. It was not. I went to see him. This well-known, recently recruited to a different hospital surgeon, who again I'm pretty well connected in the medical community in this area of the country, and did some a lot of background checking on him and got references from C-suite individuals who I know. And they said, this is the guy. He's an artist, I think was one of the terms. And literally, I don't think we were in there for 5 minutes before he started saying, I'm going to do a Whipple on you. Just prior to getting an EUS, right? Which would seem to be the next logical step.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. I mean, can't they just do like a fine needle biopsy and determine definitively?
His words, I don't know his exact words, Roger, but he said, no matter what the EUS says, I would still recommend a Whipple.
Just because it might be precancerous or something like that, I suppose.
I don't know. Just because I was a pretty healthy piece of meat, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you dodged a bullet there because I know that is a nasty.
I dodged a bullet.
surgery.
I often think about what would have happened to my life had I said, okay, fine, let's go do this, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is a gutsy move. I know to go. So I was a pancreatic cancer patient, and I probably took about half the advice my doctors gave me, and I know that it's a hard thing to say no to an expert.
Yes.
It's a really hard thing. And the other thing that strikes me, just as a comment listening to you, is just such a complex set of diseases that, like you said, it took 5 minutes for them to tell you, here's this one size fits all solution for you,
Right.
or this monotherapy. And you don't know what works for one cancer won't work for another. What works in one person won't work in another. So let me ask you the second thing. You didn't take any chemo at all then, I think
Nope.
you said.
Nope.
Do you recall which chemo they recommended?
I have it in my notes, but I don't recall it off the top of my head.
It was probably R-CHOP. That's what's typical for diffuse large B-cell lymphoma.
Yeah, because you said something that really caught my attention about how the chemo itself can cause secondary cancers. And I was super concerned about that myself. And I got different answers from different people. But the last time I talked to because I raised it every time I talked to them. And the last time I talked to my doctor, he said, no, he says, that's really only the platinum-based chemotherapies that you have that risk for. But I don't think anyone really knows, to tell you the truth. I think it's all just a guess. Brad,
I would just, I'm a lymphoma survivor, and I'll just tell you the mental state. They love something that was originally studied in 1992 because they now know that there are side effects. You can have constipation, or you can have diarrhea, or you can have, heart issues, you can have this, that, and they're on the lookout for all those things, and they have ways of dealing with them. So anything that has, and they know what the long-term effects are, because since it's been used since 1992, they know what the long-term effects are. So like Mark, I got CAR T. Right now, what is the experience with CAR T for lymphoma patients? Like they have a year or two. It's like, because there are different variations. And so they don't know what the 10-year effect is going to be. So they don't like that as much. There may be down the road side effects, and we don't know about them today. Like the sorts that Jeff was talking about. It could be, another cancer crops up, or it could be some other comorbidity with another organ, or something. So they love old tried and true. They love tried and true. That's a bias built into the system because they know how to deal with it and they know the long-term effects. So it's a feature, not a bug from their perspective.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, I got a couple more questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
So in my case, after I was diagnosed, I kind of figured, like you, I said, I did everything right. How did this happen? And I went on a search to find out what was wrong. So I did. I tested every blood marker you could come up with, mycotoxins, chemicals, plastics, metals, pathogens, everything. Did you do that as well? And did you find anything that maybe it might have been a triggering cause for you?
Did some of it. I went through, some detoxification, in various parts of your body, and even soaking my feet into some
Yeah, I did that too.
solution. You know what I'm talking? You did that too?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you watch all the really creepy shit underneath the microscope and go, oh, that's gross. I was on some supplements to help clear the pathogens out of the body. Yeah, I did go through a lot of that. Yeah.
Do you have like an opinion as to what it was? Because like I say, you did everything right and came up with a cancer.
I'm sorry, as to what
Do you
it
have
was.
any idea what it was? I mean, what was the risk factor for you? I mean, I eventually concluded for me it was just age. I couldn't find mostly.
You know, I don't know. I think that maybe it was a misdiagnosis. Maybe it's just okay. There's a polyp and it's over a certain size. It's got to be cancerous. You better get it cut out. I sort of challenge the thinking process of these doctors. They just automatically say this is what you got to do. And do I really ever know? Will I really ever know what it was? I probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
And I guess no, I guess I'm okay with that right now.
You're okay. Last question, what are you doing in terms of monitoring now? Do you view yourself at high risk, or do you think you're just completely okay?
I don't think I'm at high risk. That might be, depending upon person's perspective, a good or a bad approach. I'm 68 years old. I still play, young men's sports 5-6 days a week. I eat right. My mind's in a good place. I've got a great life, got a great wife, kids, and life's good. And I think a lot of this, if anybody takes anything away from it, the mind really has a significant impact in, I think, helping yourself heal. I didn't believe that I had cancer. I never believed it. Despite, going to all these doctors and saying, well, you got it, you better get it cut out. And I'll add those 5 or 6 places that I went around the country, those well-known institutes, most of them were, they were okay with like giving me the time. But what I didn't know until after the fact, I think maybe one of the last one we went to was a female surgeon, and she was just flat out rude to me when she said, how many are you going to go see before you're going to listen to us? Then I realized, oh shit, everybody sees my records. They all know that I went to 5 other places before I came to them. And again, as I said, for the most part, people were polite and gave me their time. But one woman just said, I don't want to give you any of my time because you're just going to probably go on and talk to somebody else. So yeah. So to answer your question, Rod, I have no idea, really.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, could you describe a little bit about your research process? Obviously, as you said, you went to 6 institutions and you got second opinions. That was a repeated theme. It's like you're going to get multiple perspectives on your diagnosis and your treatment options. What else did you do to give you the confidence to chart your own path?
A tremendous amount of reading. I probably a dozen books I read on the matter. Certain books that people telling their own story, how they cured their cancer by certain diet changes, exercise changes, a lot of internet searching, right? A lot of good use for AI, right? For GPT models. And I think honestly, I went down rabbit holes often, and maybe I was trying to find the answer that I wanted to hear. I'm not saying that I really ever did, because I talked to so many people and I read so many books and did enough research to say, well, I've got all this data in front of me like a CEO would have to make a decision. I just got to make a decision on which is the right way to go. And is there risk there? Yeah. And again, as I said towards the end, had I been coughing up blood or had really severe symptoms or pain, maybe I would not have had the luxury to go through this process the way that I did, which was about a 2-year process, by the way.
And we had Richard Bagdonas on last week, a similar pioneering patient who actively engaged in his care, similar tech background engineer. And one of the things he talked about, which you've also done, you've written a book. Like, what motivated you to write a book? In his case, he said it was survivor's guilt. Part of his, almost like his own personal therapy, is giving back and sharing the journey that he went on. Can you speak to a little bit why you're here today, why you wrote a book, and what you're hoping to achieve by sharing your story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really felt that while I never really considered myself a different person, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm half crazy, because most entrepreneurs are half crazy. They don't like to hear the word no. And I really felt I uncovered some really valuable information that I wanted to share with people. And I wanted to have, they may not have the capability or the appetite or the desire or the, ability to take rejection as much as I have. And I thought, okay, I'll put it in a book. And by the way, it's a short story. It's about 60 pages. It isn't that long, but I go into a lot more detail than what I talked about today, and also providing footnote references to where I got most of my data. For example, a lot of people who've read the book have first thing they say is, I can't believe that story's about chemotherapy. I can't believe it, the markups. I can't believe that it's the most, lucrative part in American medical history. It's kind of shocking to most, but I think we're in a system that just, kind of churns people through and treats the symptoms, and everybody makes a lot of money, and okay, people are going to die anyway, right? So what the hell? But to answer your question more directly, I just want to offer somebody some help, right? And maybe not be afraid. And again, people may listen to what I said today or read the book and go, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to follow the path. Well, that's fine. That's fine.
What argument would you make to persuade someone who says, I really, because we've heard this repeatedly, I'm thinking of a recent story. It was an elderly woman whose son was advising her to get a second opinion or to ask some questions to the doctor, to challenge the doctor, that sort of thing. And she said she didn't want to rock the boat, with this relationship. What argument would you make to someone who doesn't feel comfortable challenging their doctor or getting a second opinion?
That's a tough one, because oftentimes I'll give you a perfect example. My father, going back 25 years ago, went in for a routine checkup. The guy says, I think you need a 5-way bypass. I got an opening tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning. He's never had a heart problem. But my dad, I was traveling, and I called him at night, see how I was doing. And he told me, I said, Dad, don't go. Just wait till I get back. And he goes, no, he's such a good guy. I'm taking his advice. He went ahead a 5-way bypass. Did he need it? I don't know. Did the guy have a cancellation and an opening and he just wanted to fill it? I don't know. So somebody like my own father, I couldn't convince to probably look at even a second opinion. And I think there are people who like me and people like my dad, and it's very difficult, I think, to convince people to get out of their comfort zone. And if they're comfortable listening to people of authority, then that's great. I tend to ask a few more questions before I make any decision.
Right.
I'll share one other thing with everybody. It's another book that I read. It's called Blind Spots. This is an important one. Dr. Marty Makary, if anybody's ever heard of him, he happens to be the current FDA commissioner in our administration. His book exposes this systematic dysfunctions in the U.S. healthcare system rooted in ethical blind spots, cultural blind spots, financial and institutional. And these lapses fuel unsafe care, he says, inflated costs, he says, and silence in the face of opposition. And a lot of it is around groupthink and how groupthink is very damaging to this whole medical system. Somebody mentioned earlier NIH funding. He talks a couple of chapters about the people who get this NIH funding are generally older researchers that want to validate their own thinking of what they know, not looking for new things along the way. So I highly recommend that book, Blind Spots.
Mark has raised his hand. Mark.
Yeah, just kind of your healthcare ecosystem. Any difference you've kind of discovered between like Kaiser, where the doctors are all salaried employees, versus smaller institutions, or I don't know, state institutions or any perspective on that?
Honestly, no, I don't. I named all the ones that I went to. There was, yeah, yes, like the teaching hospital. Well, I'll just say it, it's the University of Cincinnati. Reasonably well known. They're not paid nearly as much as, say, somebody at a Sloan Kettering or other private institutions. But I really couldn't answer your question, honestly, Mark. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on from the NIH funding, I mean, I've heard that kind of the work we're doing now, that from physicians, clinicians, that sometimes their colleagues have survived on grants for years and they never produce anything.
Right.
So there seems to be a whole lane of academia where, yeah, I mean, hopefully they produce, they're Nobel Prize winners, but they're okay with just surviving on grants.
And that's exactly right, Mark. And in his book, I'll try to remember this. He highlights specific examples where tens of millions of dollars of grant funding was given, 5 years of effort, and the studies resulted in, we extended the life of the person by 1.6 months. Okay, maybe that's really important to the family, and I'm not knocking that, but is that really success? Not a cure for the problem, but just a slight increase in survival rates. So
yeah, I mean, there's a whole fight, as you know, within the current administration, kind of redoing academic or funding regarding indirect costs. So the Gates
Sure.
Foundation funds 15% indirect costs. Harvard, a lot of universities have been 60%. So that's what the fight is about right now. So, but I've talked to clinicians, people saying, yeah, it needs to be redone. The indirect costs, adding, real estate and all the costs that go into that. So I think they're right to look at that, review it, and they just want the money to go to research, not for paying, real estate costs, facilities, et cetera.
yeah. And after reading this book, not taking a political side either way on this thing, at least I think this guy's he's a surgeon, he's a researcher, this Marty Makary guy, and now he's head of the FDA. He might be, a beachhead for helping change this whole system because he knows and he's willing to talk about it.
Thanks.
Sure.
We're reaching the end of the hour, Jeff, and I think we've run out of questions, unless anyone has any more. I always like to close by giving you an opportunity to kind of have parting words of wisdom. Or Raj, did you have something?
Yeah, Jeff, as part of this whole journey, did you explore treatments, immunotherapy, more targeted treatments, which are not for the types of cancers that you were, potentially diagnosed with? And did you see any? Did you research those? Did you talk to people? And was there any resistance that you got as part of that effort?
Yeah, the last oncologist, Raj, that I saw, I guess he had to go to some board at the hospital to get approval for me as a patient to take immunotherapy, and I was a candidate, but I stupidly didn't know much about it at the time, and I thought it was just, I just take like one pill and I'm done. Well, it's a series of, it was almost the same length of time as the chemotherapy. It's just kind of, less poison, I suppose. So I decided, nah, I'll just skip that and stick to my natural treatments. Yes.
Okay. What I was setting up was any parting words of wisdom, any kind of summary thoughts. What do you want to leave us with? Because you had so many.
Sorry about that. I think really, take ownership, personal agency, be responsible, push back on people, ask questions. The guy in the white coat doesn't have all the answers, right? And I think it's imperative that we take our own personal agency for our own bodies. And if nothing else, I hope that left people with, okay, I may ask you a few more questions. I may not do what this guy did, me, but I'll ask you a few more questions just to be more comfortable.